Behold, I am the children whom the Lord hath given me, are for signs and for wonders in Israel, from the Lord of hosts, which dwells in Mount Zion. And when they shall say to you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek to their God? For the living, to the dead, to the law and the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light.
Okay. A little trouble there. Good morning, welcome to, good day, good afternoon. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing our study today in the book of Job. We're in chapter 25. Let's begin reading. Then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, Dominion and fear are with him. He maketh peace in his high places. Is there any number of his armies? And upon whom doth not his light arise? How then can man be justified with God? Or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Behold, even to the moon, and it shineth not. Yea, the stars are not pure in his sight. How much less man, that is a worm, and the Son of Man, which is a worm? But Job answered and said, How hast thou helped him that is without power? How savest thou the arm that hath no strength? How hast thou counseled him that hath no wisdom? And how hast thou plentifully declared the thing as it is? To whom hast thou uttered words, and whose spirit came from thee? Dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. Hell is naked before him, and destruction hath no covering. He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. He bindeth up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not rent under them. He holdeth back the face of his throne, and spreadeth his cloud upon it. He hath compassed the waters with bounds, until day and night come to an end. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. He divideth the sea with his power, and by his understanding he smiteth through the proud. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens, and his hand hath formed the crooked serpent. Lo, these are parts of his ways. But how little a portion is heard of him? But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Moreover, Job continued his parable and said, As God liveth, who hath taken away my judgment, and the Almighty, who hath vexed my soul? All the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. My lips shall not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. God forbid that I should justify you till I die. I will not remove mine integrity from me. My righteousness I hold fast, and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. Let mine enemy be as the wicked, and he that riseth up against me as the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the hypocrite, though he hath gained, when God taketh away his soul? Will God hear his cry when trouble cometh upon him? Will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call upon God? I will teach you by the hand of God. That which is with the Almighty will I not conceal. Behold, all ye yourselves have seen it. Why then are ye thus altogether vain? This is the portion of the wicked man with God, and the heritage of oppressors, which they shall receive of the Almighty. If his children be multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Those that remain of him shall be buried in death, and his widows shall not weep. Though he heap up silver as the dust, and prepare raiment as the clay, he may prepare it, but the just shall put it on, and the innocent shall divide the silver. He buildeth his house as a moth, and as a booth that the keeper maketh. The rich man shall lie down, but he shall not be gathered. He openeth his eyes, and he is not. Terrors take hold on him as waters. A tempest stealeth him away in the night. The east wind carrieth him away, and he departeth, and as a storm hurleth him out of his place. For God shall cast upon him, and not spare. He would fain flee out of his hand. Men shall clap their hands at him, and shall hiss him out of his place. Yeah, he goes on, so we're going to just pause there because we got a lot to cover. So the answer of Bildad, Job is continually maintaining his innocence. Again, not complete perfection of character, but, well, not perfection of history. But I think the assertion here in the theoretical sense is that when someone comes to completion, that kind of perfection, where they have arrived as far as man can go with God on earth. There's no temptation taking you such as is common to man. There's no reason we can't resist temptations. And there are things that can take you unaware. But God understands our frame and, especially things that are done in error. But the point is not for us to become, as righteous as Job, but to understand that in spite of any righteousness that we could possess, and also in spite of the fact that we may be believers in Jesus and have obtained eternal salvation through faith in his blood, that doesn't mean bad things can't happen to you in this world. You will suffer tribulation in this world. That doesn't mean the wrath of God is upon you. That's what people don't understand. That's why they're still confused about Revelation. They think we got to be raptured because they don't understand the idea that things other than the wrath of God can get you. It's just the way it goes. And of course, the wrath of God is never directed at his people. When I say his people, I mean those who are called according to his purpose, those who are his chosen, those who are also faithful. Not just those like in ancient Israel who were called his people, but acted as if they weren't. And that's much the case in the modern world. They call themselves his people, but let me tell you, at Armageddon, they're going to be no different than Gog and Magog. They're going to be like far off heathen that don't know the value of human life, that don't know right from wrong. Suppressing the weak and the fatherless and and all that. Doing all those things that are, things we ought to know better. Christians can't go around oppressing people or being party to it either. Dominion and fear are with him. He has rulership and fear. The fear of God is I understand that there's that power there. It's not that you have to be actively terrified, but you're a fool if you don't take him seriously. Just like if you have a down power line, if you don't take that situation seriously, you could get yourself killed. Same thing with God. Take him seriously. And again, we do point out Bildad and the other friends are wrong in their basic formulation. But among those things they say, some of the things are not untrue. I mean, yes, dominion and fear are with God. But what's he getting at? That's the point. He maketh peace in his high places. You know, I wonder what they think he meant by that in like the modern translations. Let's check it out. I'll bring you there. They translate, dominion and awe belong to God. Okay, yeah, but he establishes order in the heights of heaven. I get it. That makes sense. He makes peace. What is that word peace? Is it literally, that's going to throw me off if it's just like, it's shalom. That's what I mean about interpretation. It means, now they may be right. I do think they're interpreting it properly. Making peace is a part of, what does peace represent? What does peace look like? Every man under his vine, every man under his fig tree. Men building houses and inhabiting them. Men planting vineyards and eating the fruit of them. Able to do the necessary things of life without interference, without fear and trepidation that someone's going to fall upon you and take things away. And, that peace is that. That's what peace represents. And it is a kind of order, right? It often takes order to have peace. While there are peaceable people, there are some people who are not peaceable. That's why we have police. Well, though we live in a high trust society in America, we don't have a police presence everywhere to keep order because we don't need it, because people generally keep themselves in order. Nevertheless, some people can't, or don't, or never learned. Probably a combination of those three, right? Depending on which way you're looking at the problem. The high places, I definitely think, is the heavenlies. He maketh peace in the heavenlies. He establishes the order of the heavenly peace. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's kind of like his will is done in heaven. Nothing wrong with that. But it's what he's using that to drive at. Again, it's this argument that God is just so high that whatever's happening to you, even if it seems out of proportion to the, and you may have, maybe made sacrifice for those youthful indiscretions and all that, and they were just indiscretions. They weren't some heavy crime. You've paid for everything as God would have it, and we know this is true of Job, that there was nothing, no debt he owed God for any sin. Said anything he had done was already accepted with God as far as there had been sacrifices made and so on and so forth. Because for minor sins, why wouldn't God be willing to forgive us if we show repentance? And this is not like, a lot of times people think Jesus' blood is for your little petty sins. No, it's because our sins go way beyond that. It goes way beyond little things like that. Yeah, it also covers that. But it covers things like murder too. That's why there's blood. Jesus' blood didn't necessarily have to be shed because you were impolite, but because, though it covers indiscretions such as that, it's there for much graver things, so that men might be forgiven in our foolishness, in our denial of the light. Job was talking much about the light last time, you remember. So, yeah, there's pretty much, translation looks pretty normal. Okay, so, is there any number of his armies? He's so great. He has innumerable armies, the armies of heaven, thousands and, thousands of thousands of thousands, or whatever, like 200,000, the army of the horsemen of heaven, right? Or no, that was a different army. Never mind. Anyways, is there any number, upon whom doth not his light, God, the light of God, the probing gaze of the Almighty. There's nowhere that he doesn't see. And he's still hinting at that, oh, come on, Job, there's something you're not seeing that God is, maybe, And he's just saying, because God is so great, how can man be justified with God? Just, we're not an order of magnitude to be justified with God, right? Now, man cannot justify himself before God per se, because the way it always works From the Old Testament, I will give you the sure mercies of David. What was above the ark? There was the mercy seat, because upon which the blood of the sacrifice is sprinkled. Because the blood is the sort of the intercessory element of the ritual that points to the sacrifice given to obtain mercy, in the hopes of obtaining mercy. And why does God needs? Is he bloodthirsty? No. Giving up something important to you or valuable is one way to demonstrate your sincerity. Of course, living a sacrificial life in Christ is the modern way of doing that. Offer your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable before God. And you're supposed to be living a sacrificial life. We are a sacrifice. Sacrifices are still required. Not for your salvation, but as a result of your salvation, sacrifices will be made. You may have to, and it may be of things you used to value. Just depends. It goes in the metaphorical realm of what sacrifice means. It's not to earn your salvation, but because of salvation, because of who you become in Christ, your life can't remain the same. So things are going to be cut out. Things are going to be removed. I'm not well today, and that's why I've got my glasses on. I'm rubbing my eyes. This morning was very difficult. We'll see how we go. I'm feeling mentally acute, but I guess I feel like this heaviness on my head. So how then can man be justified? How can he be clean that is born a woman? As Christians, we believe in this idea of not all of us, but Christians have concepts like original sin. And they also have concepts like total depravity for the Calvinists and others who have that. That man is in a depraved state, that we are sinful. Job's outstanding character doesn't really take away from that. Because as you know, when we studied Job, he admitted he never claimed himself to be perfect. God said he was perfect. And that's the thing. God has declared him perfect. And yes, he has not done these horrible things. His sins, maybe when he's young, he forgot to observe a holiday. There were certain things that you needed to follow, and it's not all life and death. Just like with Jesus when he was going through the field picking corn, and even though the law was very strict about that, as far as going out to hunt for manna on the Sabbath was Sabbath breaking, even if he didn't find any manna. So picking corn is too. And Jesus didn't say, he didn't argue, this is not technically a violation of the law. He didn't go that legalistic route. He went the route of, I'm Lord of the Sabbath. How David broke the Sabbath? I'm like that. I'm above it. Because I'm King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I mean, he didn't say it like that, but that's he's beginning to suggest these things. Because those little things don't make you perfect. Wearing the right clothes, eating the right foods, saying the right magic words in some sort of ritualistic chanting or something. In so many religions, it's about performing rituals and doing this. And those minutiae, while they can be valuable as far as inspiring us to be in a more meditative and spiritual mindset, they can be useful. Just like I think churches can be useful. Going to church can put you in a more religious mindset, and because the building is designed to do that. So I don't hate stained glass. I actually like the aesthetic of a Catholic church. Maybe that's from my youth. I don't like the authoritarian structure of a Catholic church, but I do like their aesthetic. They got a nice aesthetic. They tune that in. When you go to church, it should be something beautiful. I mean, if you're going to do, I don't really think that's necessarily true, I guess, but there should be something beautiful, right? I mean, the words, some beautiful message, beautiful words. Preferably beautiful ideas. But, you have the nativity here. You got the 12 apostles, things to meditate on. I don't think it's all, some people think all that is bad. And then there are people who think all music is bad. You have to sing a cappella. And, it's just more of that same legalism. And none of that stuff is what really makes you perfect. And oftentimes, as Jesus said, these hypocrites, they swallow a gnat. They strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. And that's, I think, whenever you see people legalistically nitpicking these little things that aren't very righteous, like, it doesn't take a lot of effort to put a tassel on. In the Old Testament, it said you got to wear a tassel on your garment. And there's these Hebrew roots people, they'll wear the tassel. Well, that's not a hard form of righteousness. Just like it's like, well, I'm not a murderer. Well, good for you. It's like, like Job says, or he's about to say, like, when did you help somebody last? Did you relieve the suffering? Because that's what it starts getting down to. What God really wants for people. He wants them to relieve suffering when they see it. And definitely not look down their noses at the suffering of others and say, like, well, you probably deserve it. That's not good. And as you notice, Job's replies get more and more hard towards them. I detect a lot more animosity because he's accusing them of sin. And it's the sin of the way they're treating him. Again, it's not an unpardonable sin. As God says, go pray for, Job needs to pray for his friends because they got it wrong. They don't know what they're talking about when it comes to God. That was important. They're pious men. Pious men get things wrong. I've gotten things wrong in the past. I might have a couple things wrong right now. Hopefully not really big things, like Jesus is Lord and he rose from the dead, right? And we all agree on that. And those are the most important things. But the funny thing is, people do get away from that. Because Jesus is Lord starts becoming an empty slogan. It just becomes an emblem of a badge of just belonging to a group. Just like with political, Team Red and Team Blue. It's and your faith becomes a question of loyalty to your team, even when your team is doing evil. And that's the problem. That's what's going on with Israel. Our brand loyalty is blinding us. The fact that they suffered so much last century at the hands of the Germans, makes people want to defer to them. I've even heard people say they should be allowed to do that. Okay, if they should be allowed to do that, they should be doing that in Europe. I mean, honestly, if you're gonna make the people pay who had something to do with it, though that's wrong. You don't make the children pay for the sins of the parents. And the people who were living in that region of the world before were not in any way belligerent to the Jews. In fact, a lot of Jews lived in those regions. In fact, during the Ottoman Empire, a lot of Jews lived in the Ottoman Empire. So, they had to pay the jizya or whatever. Okay. Point is, at least they had a doctrine that allows for peaceful coexistence. We don't really. We're supposed to, Christians, we're supposed to convert everybody. We don't bother with coexisting. Though, it's certainly in the scriptures that we should, as much as possible, seek to live peaceably with all men. You look at the way the gospel was preached initially. Yes, we preach our gospel, but it's when it gets coercive and becomes an instrument of the state. It's really bad. Anyways, so Bildad is just hung up on this. God is great, so great that you deserve this. That's what he's saying. You deserve this. Even the stars, this goes, when he says to the moon, I think it means this goes to the moon and to the stars. I mean, that there is nothing, because the stars are amazing, sparkling things up there. What's unclean about them? Nothing. That's, just like when he talks about the skin of my teeth. What's notable about the skin of your teeth? Your teeth don't have skin. I mean, they have enamel, but it's not skin. That's the point. It's like, well, it's almost like there isn't. I got by. That's how tight it was, by the skin of my teeth. What skin, right? That's how close it was. Razor's edge. It's a hyperbole to absurdity to point the point out. It's like that I'm barely escaping. Even to the moon, even to the stars. Those things are not pure to God. But again, they're also inanimate. They're not created in his image. Now, he could be alluding to the angels. I don't think so. But even so, the angels, the armies of heaven, The holy angels are holy, and then the evil spirits are evil. Man is a worm, man is a worm, man is a worm. Yes, that's true, but that's the point. Man is a worm. And God has pity on man. And God has, from the beginning, had pity on man. He looked at us, but we didn't know it. We haven't known it. But from the beginning, his objective was to take corruptible man, such as we are, and to redeem from us people that he would adopt as his own sons, like they're his children. Even though we are not his children. Not really. Only in the way that the birds and the fish are, and the worms are his children, and the stars are his children. I mean, in the sense that he made it all. He's the father of all. But that's the thing. Even though making us, he doesn't owe us a living. He doesn't owe us anything. The most you could say is he owes it to us to send us back to the oblivion from whence we came. And I do believe that is the ultimate promise of punishment, is that the second death is a return to the oblivion from which you came after sufficient extraction of value has been made. Because there is certainly going to be an extraction of value from people who have lived for a reason. Everyone's here for a purpose, even if your purpose is to ultimately be destroyed. Because it helps tempt me, because I look at people getting away with it. Oh, they're getting away with doing evil. And so I got to think about that. Is that true? Are they really getting away with it? Well, it seems like it, but they don't all get away with it. Some do. Some get right down to their old age. You're like, oh, wicked old George Soros. Look how old he is, and he's still using all that money to do all that evil, and he'll probably die a rich man. And his son after him will carry on his evil work. How is that fair? And he thinks it's good work. Give him credit, at least that way. I don't think most of these people are like, I'm doing evil. A lot of it's the banality of evil. They think they're doing good, and it's for your own good. For the good of the planet, we've got to reduce the population. For the good of the planet and for the good of humanity and for that we all flourish, we've got to, get control of things and censor free speech and all this. It's always, they justify it. It's always a justification. But they never fully analyze it to the point where you realize it's like, no. Free speech is the safest bet. People need to be able to freely argue things out. That way you can have the best chance of getting the right information. Trusting just one source and saying, well, they're going to decide for everybody. That is a good way to go extinct. It's one of the reasons why I think people are so different from each other, so that we don't all make the same decisions and get killed. How hast thou helped him that is without power? How savest thou the arm that hath no strength? Again, he's saying, this is what I think the key issue is right here. It's not my sin. It's you neglecting the other end of righteousness, which is not just, don't be an evildoer. You have to be a positive force for good in the world. That's what God expects of you. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. You don't have to be Superman. It can be as simple as, being a conscientious parent, raising your family. Be a conscientious husband, loving your wife, trying to make it work. Or wife, husband, all that stuff. That's part of serving God. Because while we conform to his will and do what we know is right and true, even setting that example to our children, and it helps make the world a better place. And so, there's more to righteousness, and we don't do evil. We also do positive good. We take the weak and we strengthen them. We help them that are powerless. Those that have no wisdom, we counsel them. You could laugh at fools. I mean, hey, if I counsel someone and they don't listen, then they might hear my laughter, okay? And that's on them. Like, I told you so. I'm not going to cry now. I told you. I would cry if I hadn't said so. If I hadn't given the wisdom, if I hadn't imparted it, and then, why didn't I say something? You know, a lot of times you see people do stupid things. And it's like, well, I knew better. Say, well, why didn't you say something? Well, I didn't want to interfere. Say again, people don't want to risk their neck to save someone from trouble sometimes. Well, that's not a good, you're not a good person. You know, not on the side of God, not on the side of Job. When people are down and out, you're not supposed to kick them and say, oh, look at God has cursed you. You have no wisdom. Don't ask me to teach. You know, it's like my brother's teacher told him, don't help him, otherwise he'll never learn. He didn't know how to spell was. He got up and he said W-U-Z, and they all laughed. And then some kid was like, I can tell him. And they're like, no, don't tell him. You'll never learn. That's why I'm glad I will continue to have my children avoid elementary school. Elementary school, I don't think, is a good way to educate children. Children shouldn't be schooled at all, in my opinion. Schooling, that treating them like fish is a bad idea. Especially young children. I don't, like I said, I've said my kids to high school, I got mixed feelings about it, but they're better able to handle it. If you've raised them right, they should be able to navigate that no problem. And it's a good start it's a supervised life. Eventually they're going to go into real life. I didn't start homeschooling my kids to shelter them from everything. It was always because I thought I could do a better job than the school. It wasn't because I was trying to I don't want them to get exposed to things. No, I knew that. There is that. I don't want them to get just exposed to whatever. You know, like I said, my first day of school, elementary, first grade, all the kids explained to me what this meant. Let me see if I can get it. You know, you got a little ring. You go, hey, you know what this means? Do you know what this means? Hey, do you know, first grade. And, that's how it is. So, I definitely don't think I want that subject to come up in first grade. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's time for a kid to be putting their mind through the reproductive mechanics of human beings, unless they had it in them to be curious. I talked to a 11-year-old once about it because they were curious. So you talk to them. I gave them a toned down version from the one I give them when they turned 12. I think it was actually 10, something like that. It was early. No one had ever asked. I had 8 kids. Only one kid ever asked about the birds and the bees before I was ready to tell them. And you can tell them earlier, but the thing is you got to give them a different version. But the problem is if you send them to elementary school, they're going to get the pornographic version. And they're going to run into kids who have phones. That's what gets me is like, I didn't let any of my kids have phones till they were 16. How hast thou plentifully declared the thing as it? How hast thou plentifully? I like that. I'm not sure if that translation is correct. I'm going to look at it real quick. Verse 3 of the next chapter. NIV. And what great insight you... Well, I see what the point is. I thought this too as I was reading. I was going to say this, but I thought you could regard these not as questions, but as interjections. How you have helped the powerless. How you have saved the arm that is feeble. Whoa, what advice you have offered to one without wisdom. Oh, and what great insight you have displayed. I think I like that best of all as far as it's the same thing. Again, by saying it like this, of course he's being sarcastic. Because it's like, how you have helped, they haven't helped the powerless. So by putting it this way, he is actually asserting that they haven't done these things. And also begging the question for them to consider within their own mind. So again, I do like the NIV translator's decision to go with exclamations instead of, I said interjections, exclamations instead of interrogations. Who has helped you utter these words? And whose spirit spoke from your mouth? The dead are in deep anguish. Interesting. The dead are in deep anguish. Those beneath the waters and all that live in them. I wonder if deep anguish is really the right word there. Maybe that's an effect of their interpretation. Let's see. Well, we gotta go back to the King James. Dead things. Now, I knew this was going to be this. Remember, there's something called Raphaim. And it means, well, it's like, it's brought up in Isaiah 26. The Raphaim from beneath. And also the Raphaim in chapter 11 of Isaiah, talking about the devil. And again, this is often thought of as, the Raphaim are thought to be fallen angels by some. And then, again, are formed, is I think where they're getting, are in anguish. But they use form because it means to bear. Or is what they said. That's what it said in the quick time. When I looked here, it says, like there's a little pop-up, and it says chul, or chul, to bear. And here I go, chul, and it's like, I don't see anything about bear. To twist, whirl, dance, writhe, travail, be in anguish, be pained. Travail meaning childbirth type things. But you can look at the translation. How is it used? In Genesis 8, he stayed yet others 7. This is the chapter 8. That was the, what is that? Oh, verse 10. Oh. And he waited yet 7 days, another, and again that's Noah in the ark. So was he tormented? It meant he waited. And the idea of twisting, torment, I mean, this word can mean torment, of course, and anguish, of course. But look at the root cause, and then in the context, what does it mean? I certainly think about the way the weeds move back and forth under the water, in the sense of like dancing, like the dance of the dead under the water, whirling and twirling, and I think of a guy like chained down to the bottom of the ocean with like cement shoes, and his dead body's kind of just floating around. I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like to me, at least. Like if I take it all literal. And it can be used in several different ways. And it's going to depend on the context here. So dead things, and again, that are formed from under the waters. This also could be a reference to the abyss. Because that's what the abyss is. It is the ultra deep water. So the Raphaim under the waters, but why that would be brought up here is kind of odd. I mean, like that's the danger of reading into those things. Raphaim does mean indeed dead things, but not, the normal word for like dead bodies, but like, or dead, even dead animal bodies. It's a different, unusual word. In fact, let's go back to the concordance real quick. I'll show you. And this is worth showing. When I click on dead here, or I'm going to bring it up in a second window, Rapha, and I go there, it's plural, but that's okay. Notice they call it spirit, ghost, shade. Derived from the root meaning to heal or restore. Often translated spirit or ghost in the New Testament. But again, how many times is it used? Well, Job 26, Psalm 88. Shall the dead arise? And her paths unto the dead. Proverbs 2. That's the strange woman who leads you astray. He knoweth not that the dead are there. Well, that's again the house of that woman, a different incident. And the congregation of the dead in Proverbs. And then it stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. And here again, they shall not live. They are deceased. They are Raphaim. They shall not rise. Now that's in the same passage. That's an interesting passage, Isaiah 26:14, or 26 anyways, not 14 particularly, because, I don't know if I go right there, yeah. Because he goes on to say, well, they are dead, they shall not live. They are Raphaim, or they are Raphaim, they're deceased, which is Rapha. Muth, they are dead. Okay. They shall not live, they are Rapha, they shall not rise. Therefore thou hast visited and destroyed them and made their memory of them to perish. But he goes on to say later in that chapter, thy dead, thy Muth, a different Muth, shall live together with my dead body, not Rapha, but Nabila, which is a carcass or corpse, shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, for thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead, which there again is Raphaim, shades or ghosts. And that does not refer to resurrection, but, well, it could. It could refer to that second resurrection. The resurrection of the dead spirits, of those who are not alive. Or to like evil spirits in the sense of the ones that are the angels, or that are the demons, we could call them. A lot of that is not, a lot of that stuff, getting really specific and nailing that down is kind of tough because there's a lot of information about it. And people often want to get way into that, but it gets into intruding into things that we haven't seen and we don't totally understand. And also it stands as not being very critical to our faith. And we can get really hung up on angels and demons and alienate people and also isolate ourselves needlessly because we put it at the center of our faith instead of where it belongs, at the periphery. I didn't actually go down all the way to that verse. There you go. My dead shall live together with my dead body. Okay. Okay, we got a lot of time. That's good. Dead things. So, but why is he bringing it up? Like I said, the sea gave up the dead which were in them, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. And one part of Job's argument is, of course, there has to be a resurrection, but while the wicked need to be punished, they can't be part of this resurrection, this life forever, well, whatever the life to come, whatever shape Job particularly thought that might take. I say it's somewhat ambivalent. So he's suggesting that the words he's using are not the words of God. And again, also because he's not saying the right things. You can talk a big talk about how great God is. God is great. Like that's the Muslims, right? They Allah Akbar, God is greater, right? Nothing wrong with that in and of itself. Like I said, but we have a very different religion. The content is different. That doesn't mean we shouldn't treat people in a neighborly way. We ought to. Anyways. So, hell is naked before him. Destruction hath no covering. I believe that is hell hath no, let me see. Oh, I gotta go back here. Hell is Sheol. And destruction this is that place. This is Abaddon. Abaddon. Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. Mentioned here in connection with the Raphaim, that are kept under the sea, or that are formed, that are writhing under the waters with the inhabitants thereof. Hell is naked before, the grave is wide open to God. That's what hell represents, the grave. This is not the hell of the lake of fire, but the hell of the Old Testament, which would have been just the grave, the place where people are buried. It's this, seeing that, there we go, that looks more normal. So looking awfully angular. The idea of hell being naked means, he sees all the dead. The dead are accessible to him. And destruction has no cover. He can't hide from him. Why is the angel of the bottomless pit called destruction? Because that is his function. He brings about the destruction. And this ties into the New Testament Apollyon, because Apollyon is the Greek name of it. And Apollyon is what the New Testament constantly says: fear not them that kill the body, but rather him which Apollyon destroys your soul. The destroyer. That is the devil. The devil and his work have it's all exposed before God. He stretches out the north over the empty place and hangeth the earth upon nothing. I like that one, right? And, certainly that is the case. The earth is not hanging from somewhere. It's not on the back of a bunch of elephants standing on top of a turtle. It is rather hanging on nothing. It's just hanging out there in space, which is interesting. It's in Job that way. That was understood that way. And that doesn't surprise, it may surprise some people. But I've talked before about the Antikythera device discovered off Antikythera, a shipwreck. This ancient mechanical computer using gears. And you remember the movie Clash of the Titans, the old one? It's kind of got a little bit of naughty bits in it, but I watched the made-for-TV version as a kid. And there's a clockwork owl. The flies and the gods had bestowed that upon Perseus. And of course, that seems like, well, they didn't have stuff like that in Greek time. Of course, they didn't have clockwork owls that flew around and actually had AI intelligence, basically. Of course not. But they did have mechanical computers. They had mechanical clockwork things. I was like, hold on a second here. AIDS, there we go. Okay, I have to put something about that in here sometime, because I mentioned it several times, and I'm like, I want to show them the Antikythera device. Antikythera, I think. Antikythera. You put it in there, you won't be long before you find it. So if you misspell it and call it some device, and they'll correct your spelling. Anyways, it's definitely got anti in there. And the thing is, this device, you could calculate the position of the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets. It had it all there on any given day. It was for navigation, so they know what day, where the planets are, and which way is north, and how to sail. And they had this in the time of Christ, and probably before, because they were making it then. These things don't just erupt out of nowhere. And the reason they don't find a lot of this stuff is because metal is valuable, and in a machine like that, once it stops working, they're going to break it down. They're not going to just keep it as like, oh, look at this thing. They're going to make other things with it. The value of it, like, you don't look at when you throw away an old cell phone or something, you don't think like the value to future archaeology. You're like, oh, well, they'll want this. Better save it so they know what kind of technology we had. It wouldn't be surprised. And so, and there are ancient ruins found that are exactly a meter in measurement. And that's because the meter didn't come from nowhere. It's by dividing up by some particular number. I forgot it's some exact, very round number, the circumference of the earth. It's just been done more than once. And the meter was a unit of measurement used in ancient times, apparently. To within thousandths of a millimeter. No, I would say thousandths of a centimeter, actually. Okay, so what's Job getting at? He bindeth up the waters in his thick clouds. The clouds is not rent. I guess he's sort of saying, I also know God is really big and powerful. He is. And he's saying something else. He holds back the face of his throne. Spreadeth a cloud. There's a mystery about God, is what Job's saying. Bildad's trying to say everything we know about God, and we know that bad things don't happen to good people. The wicked suffer bad things. That's God's punishment. And God does punish the wicked very often. There's consequences for doing evil. He spreadeth a cloud upon it. That indicates the hiddenness of it, because it is somewhat hidden. I've had people argue with me about it. You never read the Bible? Christians be like, God isn't hidden. Blah, blah, blah. It's like just yakety yak, not learning. People have never bothered to learn anything about Jesus except that you should be on Jesus' team. He hath compassed the waters with bounds until the day and night come to an end. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. Until the day and night come to an end. I think that means till the end of time. The waters are bound. Even he may be referring back to the waters of the abyss. Because God, until the time of judgment, there are all these things held back. There are the Raphaim and the evil dead, if you will. And what happens? We believe the righteous dead will be raised. Well, what about? And then there's the evil dead. Now they can't live again, can they? No, but they got to be made to answer, mustn't they? So they exist in this sort of half dead, half alive state, which is like the idea of spiritual death. Spiritual death is when you are alive, you're conscious, but you're under the sentence of death. God, you're spiritually dead. You don't have a spiritual life. You're not going to keep living. We have to be made alive inwardly. And then we can live again outwardly. He compassed the water with bounds, day and night come to an end. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. He divideth the sea with his power. By his understanding he smiteth through the proud. By his spirit. I wonder if that's a reference to the Exodus, because I would put this after the Exodus. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens. He hath formed the crooked serpent. The heavens are, the garnishing of the heavens meaning like I believe that refers to the stars. And in the stars there is the serpent. The serpent is a constellation. I think there's a reference to that constellation. The God made the stars also. Yes, that is true. And also, within those stars, there are different symbols and meanings. Just like God made the Garden of Eden, and he planted in that garden, in the center of the garden, a particular tree, which when you ate of it would give you the knowledge of good and evil. A tree that he would forbid man from eating. And then also he permitted the serpent to enter into it. And the serpent is, of course, also identified as more subtle than any other creature which God had made. The serpent is not a self-made man. God made him. God didn't make some good thing and then corrupt it. He was always corruptible and going to corrupt. Even if he was made perfect. Some things are made perfect and then they go corrupt. Because that's the nature of those things. God, you say, why does God allow this to happen? Because he's kind. He's generous. He allows corrupt things to exist. And also us. Because we are at a level of corruption also. Even if we're not super evil, we have corruption. We need to be dealt with. We do not deserve in and of ourselves to live forever. But with God's help, we can. With God's help, we will, because he's the one who saves us. He's the one who does the work. But we are his workmanship. So we have to be affected by it. It's not about what you do to get saved. It's about what getting saved does to you. God formed Satan. Satan belongs to God. And he's there. Why? So he could be there to tempt Christ. So he could do these are things. Someone's going to have to do this. Why? God doesn't. Peter can't betray Jesus. It's got to be Judas. Jacob can't despise his inheritance. It has to be Esau, because Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. And these are somewhat mysterious things. These are parts of his ways. I want to see how they handle that in the NIV. By his spirit he hath gone. Oh, this is the King James. I'll let you see it with me. I just opened up Photoshop. No. Okay. Here we go. Job 26, down towards the end. By his breath the skies become fair, and his hand pierced the gliding serpent. Huh. Interesting. They don't like made. All these are but the outer fringes of his work. How faint the whisper we hear of him. Who then can understand the thunder of his power? See, I think they muddy the waters a bit with their interpretations. Oh, Rahab, there's the sea monster. That's important to know. By his wisdom. Now, let's see about that forming of the serpent. Did he form the serpent or what? I like that because it's true. Now, we could be wrong about that. And this is cool again. Okay? So, totally unhelpful. It's this word. His hand hath what, the serpent? Well, to be in travail. To suffer birth pangs. I don't really think that's the way to put it, though. God, interesting. Yeah, look at the way it says here, Deuteronomy 32. God that formed thee. And they tarried. Those who danced. I gotta go with the formed. I still like formed the best. Because it doesn't seem to me like the idea of that God twisted him or perverted the serpent. Oh, God twisted the crooked serpent. He produced him. But whatever, it could be, I mean, it's not completely absurd. Otherwise, they wouldn't have translated it that way. I just don't think so. Okay. It garners the heavens, his hand hath formed the crooked serpent. Or whatever, something less. Well, these are parts of his ways, or the outer fringes. The point is, it's like, whatever, they're part of his ways. If they're the outer fringes or whatever, the point is that God is in on this. Why is there a serpent running around doing the serpent things and crooked things? God allows this. This is part of God's ways. How little a portion is heard of him. And what do they have in the NIV? They said something like, how little a portion is heard of him. And they were like, how faint the whisper we hear of him. Yeah. And I think that's about right. It's feeding into the idea of we don't understand God as much as you think. You think it's all very simple. Bad things happen to bad people. Good things happen to good people. It's not that simple. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And the question is, how do good people react to that? And how do bad people react to it? And we say, well, you know what? Good people have compassion. Good people strengthen the weak. Bad people maybe don't. Who can understand? Again, the thunder of his power. God does things and there are effects. And things happen, but we don't comprehend what, why, how necessarily. It's not saying that people can't understand thunder. What it means is people can't understand God. There are effects that come from his actions that we see them happen. Sometimes it becomes obvious because when we have the Holy Spirit, we can learn. God is much less mysterious to us than he was to Job. Because we have the revelation of Scripture much more than he did. But still, it's true. Sometimes we don't know why things are happening. But if we know Christ, we can trust that all things are working together for our good, ultimately. And that's what we have to trust in. And it's like Job, it says he's not going to dump his integrity just because something bad happens to him. He's not going to curse God and die. Anyways. So that's what we got to the end of that chapter. I said, I'm tired. We made it. We've gone an hour, so we did our full duty. I don't want to cut it short, but here we are at the end of the chapter, and I'm not feeling so great here right now. So, anyways, we'll look forward to being back again, hopefully tomorrow, God willing. And then until then, remember the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and he is the fulfillment of the law.
Behold, I am the children whom the Lord hath given me, are for signs and for wonders in Israel, from the Lord of hosts, which dwells in Mount Zion. And when they shall say to you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek to their God? For the living, to the dead, to the law and the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is